On today's show, how much better can Alperen Sengun get? What does he need to do to become an all-star this season? It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Joining us now is a very special guest, Houston Rockets enthusiast and founder of Centers Culture, Mitty, who you can track down on Twitter at Mitty Data. We're going to get real nerdy with some numbers on today's episode. It's going to be real fun because Mitty and I go way back. We've interacted on Twitter a lot, and we've interacted a ton in like the Rockets Watch space back when I did those with regularity. And Mitty, look, I know you got a bit of a soft spot for your fellow countryman in Alperen Sengun, which is who we're going to focus on. In today's episode, we're talking all things Alperen Sengun. How does he level up again? He already took a massive step forward in his game last season. What are the areas, what are the next steps that we need to see out of him for him to cement himself even more so than he already has as the Houston Rockets' best player, but not only that, as the guy that could potentially lead this Houston Rockets team back to a title one day down the line? Mitty, we're going into year 4, Alperen Sengun. What should the expectations be for Alpi at this point in his career when he was basically a borderline all-star last season?
Yeah, so he needs to just be an all-star this year. What he needs to work on mostly is just his efficiency. He needs to be able to score. He needs to be able to score maybe about the same that he has been scoring, but just with a little bit more efficiency. Obviously, I can go into the stats and stuff, but I'll save that for later. He needs to be able to develop a little bit more of an outside shot, his free throws, his mid-range shot. Defensively, I actually don't think he needs to develop that much on defense. He's already an average defensive player, and that's exactly what Ime expects of him. Also, when players do just kind of join the league, and as a third-year player, when you get older, you become better defensively as well. So, just overall, he what he's been doing, but just polish it a little bit, because what he did last year is in terms of just like his normal trajectory compared to a lot of comparable other centers like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Bam Adebayo, those guys. He's kind of in the upper echelon of those guys. He is comparably to them. So. I'm excited to see what he can do, but overall, just, put some polish on that and let him go.
I want to get into some of the discussion around, I don't want to call it a regression, but it felt like maybe his playmaking stagnated a little bit this past season. And I want to dive a little bit further into that later in our episode. Right here, I want to focus, though, on kind of you talking about the efficiency, right, for him offensively. Let's just focus on Alpi. Let's focus on his game, right? Where is he right now the most efficient when it comes to just scoring, and where is it that he needs to improve the most? Obviously, we can point to he needs to become a better outside shooter, that kind of thing. I feel like that's almost low-hanging fruit at this point. Is there, are there numbers or anything that suggest, okay, he's much better with his back to the basket, or if he's facing up in isolation, he's good there? Obviously, some of the isolation tracking data can get a little wonky because post-ups, are they counted as ISO? The NBA tracking data, you have to take it with a grain of salt sometimes.
Exactly. So, in terms of isolation, he's not the best in isolation. Just like isolation, though, that's not including post-ups. In terms of post-ups, he's pretty great. He was doubled about, I think, 80% of the time on all of his post-ups, and that's third most in the NBA. The only people ahead of him are Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So that's a big deal. He's one of the best. Company. Exactly. He's one of the best in the NBA in terms of that. What he just needs to get better on is when that happens, and we can talk about that later, but being able to kick it out. But in terms of just in his ability to go one-on-one or even one-on-two, he needs to be a little bit more efficient. And then, I mean, he's about like 50th percentile, 60th percentile in the NBA in terms of true shooting, effective field goal percentage. I think he can get that much better. Like that's not that great, but that is around the same numbers that players like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic was a little bit better. He was around 62 or whatever. Alpi's around 58% or 58% in terms of true shooting percentage. He can get those numbers up. We can talk about the outside shot as well, but in terms of his post-up ability, he's going to get more efficient, and I think that's the key there.
You know, one thing that I was maybe a little surprised to see is, and maybe this is just something that's to be expected. Obviously, when your usage rate goes up, when you get more opportunities, when you become the de facto number one option within an offense, I was surprised to see his free throw rate actually kind of take a bit of a hit, right? Where, you know, his rookie season, he had an insane free throw rate, but you start looking at, you know, how free throw rate is calculated, and a big part of it is just, okay, well, he just wasn't getting nearly the volume of attempts his rookie season, but it really felt like he made it to the line a ton his rookie year, and then I felt like kind of a step back the next two seasons as far as just his ability to draw fouls and then make his way to the free throw line for some of those easy buckets.
Exactly. And just not even talking about stats, I think he lost a little bit of his confidence in his shot around midseason or whatever. You know, he did the flamingo shot in midseason or like before midseason, and he kind of went away from it. Also, he pumped fake a lot at the 3-point line. Maybe he's looking for a better shot, maybe, you know, something else. I think it was just more the fact that he thinks he can get a better shot or a better percentage when he goes to the rim. And that's true. He's one of the most efficient, well, not one of the most efficient, but one of the best post scorers in the game right now. So it makes sense for him to go to the line. In terms of his field goal, or sorry, not his field goal, but his free throw percentage, I think that's just going to increase. Like I said, he lost confidence in his shot, but there's no really, I don't think it's going to just disappear and just go into the wind. I think the work that he's put into the offseason, from what I was told by a friend who went to Jae'Sean, talked with his coach and everything, he shot about 300 shots, or even I think 500 shots, something like that, a game, or not a game, but a day. And he did that for maybe about a month in Jae'Sean and worked with the Rockets coaches. I think even Cam Hodges talks about that. But it's obvious that he knows what he needs to work on, and I think he will develop that outside shot.
You know, at this point, Sengun, it felt like he kind of discovered almost his own version of like a go-to move with the flamingo shot a little bit, because obviously, you know, it takes a bit of a toll on you, you know, banging inside, you know, getting you back to the basket, backing guys down. That takes a lot of power, takes a lot of energy every possession that you're doing that. So having a perimeter counter, right, having an ability to get to something on the outside, you know, similar to how Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid do, right? They don't have to just overpower you or use their strength every single possession. They can rely on their outside shooting. It felt like that was going to be a really important counter to his game, and that was a really big disappointment for me last season, was seeing that shot kind of show up in the early part of the season and then just disappear as we got like halfway through the year. I think rediscovering that shot and being able to embrace it and lean further into it, even if it's never like a super, you know, analytically favorable shot, or, you know, even if he's never shooting like a crazy high percentage on him, like if he's just got it in his repertoire to help keep a defense honest, to be able to have the confidence to, okay, I'm standing, you know, 15, 18 feet away from the rim. You're not going to close out on me. Cool. I'm just going to take this little shot right here. And then the next time that I catch the ball here, you will have to close out on me. And that gives him the opportunity to attack a defender who's closing out, to drive into the paint, get to the free throw line, do all those different things offensively. Coming up, I want to get into the playmaking for Alperen Sengun, how he needs to improve as a playmaker, but also what he needs from his teammates and how they can help each other succeed. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So look, in our last episode, we talked about Reed Sheppard Rookie of the Year odds. Head on over to the Rookie of the Year odds. Right now, yeah, Zach Edey's a little bit ahead of Reed Sheppard at plus 500, but go put some money down on Reed Sheppard. Get yourself access to the free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Mitty. So I think this past season, as amazing as Alperen Sengun was, I think the playmaking or maybe lack thereof left a little bit of something to be desired. I think it's because you look back to his rookie season, his sophomore campaign, and first off, like he had like all the insane like highlight reel passes and stuff, and some of those that took a significant hit this past season. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing though. I think that was maybe some of like maturity on Alpi's part and the coaching staff trying to like rein him in a little bit, because even Ime Udoka talked about like there's some like Manu Ginobili-esque kind of tendencies with Alpi, and we know how hectic and wild and frantic Manu could get on the floor, and sometimes you just got to let those players be themselves. You can't rein them in all the way, but I do think for a guy that did garner as much attention, as much focus, and was given so much opportunity this past season as Ime Udoka and the coaching staff really leaned into him as the best player, I fully expected his assist numbers to go up further than they actually did. You look at his rookie season, he averaged 2.6 assists. Obviously, in only 20 minutes per game, that was like a really, like, we got glimpses of the passing. We're like excited, awesome, cool. Then he gets promoted to the full-time starter his sophomore year, and his assists jump up even further, up to 3.9 a game. But then year 3, comes in Ime Udoka, you're the go-to guy, all that, and his assists kind of like, they still go up a little bit further, but they stagnate around 5 a game. I would have expected him up in that 6 to 7 assists per game kind of territory, and I don't know how much of it is Alpi's fault necessarily versus like them not necessarily taking advantage of all the attention that he does generate offensively, as you pointed out with the numbers in segment 1, right? Getting double teamed, so often when he's posting up. Like maybe it's just a scheme thing where the Rockets weren't ready to really accommodate a big like that, even though they've had him for a while. Like maybe they just weren't ready for all the attention that he was garnering very early last season.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think he went into the season, or even the team went into the season knowing that he's like one of the guys. Like he's like the guy that he's going to be a hub. He's going to be passing it, dishing it out. Once they figured out his talents, they just went to him for scoring. And if you recall, Ime started his offense kind of a little bit basic. It was a very, 4-out offense, everyone on the perimeters and Alpi in the post. And then when he gets doubled, just kick it out. From the Spurs game, if you just want to rewatch something, watch the Spurs game towards the end. Literally everybody just all playing 4-out, and then Alpi's in the post and he was just kicking it out. It was great. It was great basic basketball. But as the season went on, teams adjusted, and then teams started doubling him and figured out ways to, play this shell defense where they kind of gathered around him. And even he would try to if he tried to pass it out, he was going to get a turnover. They would guard it pretty well. And that kind of tells by his assist numbers. I have them right here, month by month. In October, it's 3 games, but he was averaging 6.7 assists per game. November, 5.3 assists. Then December, 4.6. So you can see there's a decline in number of assists, and also, offensively, just inefficient. He wasn't that efficient when it came to December. So that's one thing, right? But I think in the middle of the season, he learned how to pick it up and just understand how to take the coverage and still be able to dish it out.
His assists that is a big adjustment for any player, not just Alpi, but any young star in today's NBA. You have to learn and adjust. And once you're at the top of the scouting report, or once you're the first 3 names on the scouting report, and they don't care about anybody else on the floor other than stopping you, that becomes really hard to beat. I mean, you can go across the pond and look in the Eastern Conference and see that that's exactly what the Orlando Magic and Paolo Banchero are dealing with. Is that team does not have enough offensive, or this past season didn't have enough offensive support, enough proper spacing, all that around Banchero, to where he was largely really, really inefficient, right? He had less to work with. I think there was a graphic floating around the other day where it was like Paolo Banchero's numbers compared to like Julius Randle, and Julius Randle's like way more efficient. It's like, well, yeah, look at the roster that Julius Randle had to work with, and look at the roster Paolo had. I mean, we're not turning this into a Paolo propaganda podcast, but I do think it's it's important in the context of this conversation that last season, Sengun didn't have the right pieces around him to really complement his game, right? To the 4-out spacing. I mean, Jalen Green was really struggling to shoot the ball. Dillon Brooks was shooting the ball really well, but has a bit of a slower release point. Like and at times is, for whatever reason, like weirdly enough, like a reluctant shooter last season. And I don't know if it's because Dillon was like settling in, not trying to ruffle any feathers or whatever, but it just felt like the other starters that were accompanying Alpi weren't the best of the best as far as floor spacing is concerned. And we can easily look at the Rockets 3-point shooting from last season and be like, yeah, they really bombed it last season when it came to outside shooting.
Exactly. He actually had a pretty decent potential assist. He was the second highest on the team. Obviously Fred was one of the best. Fred was just amazing in terms of playmaking. He was the guy in terms of like dishing the ball out, and he was Alpi's pick and roll partner. While that being said, Alpi needs to be able to, and I think he will, but I think he needs to just be able to kick the ball out whenever he gets doubled without making a turnover. I think by the amount of coverage that he got, his turnover percentage went up a lot. But towards the end of the season, he actually picked up a lot of these numbers back up. So his assists per game went back up to 5.4. Its lowest was about 4.2 in February or whatever. So he had like kind of a bad stretch, but that's the great thing about these. I mean, 82 games. It's a long season, but it's kind of like a roller coaster, right? You start off, you have these expectations. You might overachieve in terms of his assists and just the way he was playing. Overachieved by a lot. Kind of dipped a little bit and was like kind of returned to the mean, and then towards the end just exploded back up again. So your point about how teams adjusted to him right out of the gate, it looked really good. And like the Rockets, they struggled the first handful of games, and then they went on that 6-game win streak, and they were beaten. They beat the Kings twice, granted without De'Aaron Fox. They beat the Nuggets in there. Like, it was a really impressive stretch from them. But then teams realized, oh, okay, cool, they're just playing very basic vanilla basketball, dumping it, playing inside out, dumping it into Sengun, and then kicking it out for open shots. How do we muck this up, right? That's where the double team started coming and everything. I think one area is Sengun has to be used in a variety of ways to keep defenses guessing, right? You can't just settle into, oh, we're going to dump it down low every possession, or you can't settle into, oh, he's just going to face up at the top of the key or at the free throw line and go ISO one-on-one every possession. And you can't just stick with the high pick and roll with Fred VanVleet. You got to mix it up and have a little bit of everything in there. And I think the area where he could be potentially the most deadly this upcoming season is operating out of the short roll with whoever his primary ball handler is, whether it's Fred, whether it's Jalen, whether it's Reed Shepherd, Amin, whoever, is he draws so much attention. There's so much gravity around Alperen Sengun because he is a threat to score the ball. He's a threat to pass. He's the threat to get to the free throw line. So if you can get Alpi rolling downhill, and whoever the primary ball handler is, as long as they can deliver a timely pass to him on his way to the rim, then that's where I think he has the chance to really maximize his potential. And I'd really like to see the Rockets like lean a little bit heavier into that this next season. And not just with Fred VanVleet though, but like with a variety, because Fred is I don't want to say he's one-dimensional in how he plays, but Fred doesn't have like the downhill pressure that a Jalen or an Amin Thompson has, right? So if 100%. You mix it up and have different pick and roll partners for Alperen Sengun, then it makes it really hard to just play him one way the entire game. Whereas last season, they basically just spammed the Fred VanVleet, Alperen Sengun pick and roll, and you knew that Fred was never going to drive all the way to the basket, so it was kind of easy to game plan for at the end of the day. Exactly. And it's still pretty impressive of how efficient that play was, even though it's very obvious what's happening. Fred was doing a pick and roll, Alpi was getting it. But anyways, one of the things that actually needs to happen for Alpi to actually increase his assists, and also why that decline was happening in his assist per game, assist percentage. We were one of the lowest cutting teams in the NBA in terms of frequency. So we weren't cutting that much. There was a lot of times where we kind of just stagnated. Like I said, like the Spurs game, everyone just kind of waits there.
A lot of standing around and ball watching for sure.
Yes, ball watching. So and that it wasn't just a Spurs game, that kind of lingered on and on and on. But I think someone asked them, I don't even know if it was you, Jackson, you might have asked them. But somebody asked them, hey, so are we, are you keeping it basic on purpose? And he said, he basically said yes. Like, there's a reason why, like, I want them to learn how to do this, like, as simple as possible, and then we're going to add on to it. And that's what I thought at first. He did the same thing with the Celtics. It was a very basic, offense. Everyone was like, they struggled in the beginning, and they obviously went to the NBA Finals. But that's how Ime played. That's how Ime coached the team. It was very basic at first, but then once everyone kind of figured out how to play with each other, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown turned into tertiary, even secondary playmakers, and people around them cut. That became a great team, and that's kind of like the blueprint of what he's looking for, except you don't have a Jason Tatum, you have an Alperen Sengun, and possibly an Thompson.
And I do think that's an excellent point, right? Is Ime was super vanilla with the offense, and I will say that I would have expected it to get a little bit better as the season progressed, and it stayed pretty vanilla throughout most of the year. I understand it's really hard for coaches to add new things in as the season's going. You get so very little practice time, and then once guys start going in and out of the lineups, you start missing certain guys, and you got to strike that balance between, okay, how much do we practice and install new stuff versus keep what we've been working on, keep what we had through camp and through all the off season and everything. So they won't have the adjustment period this year across the board, right? Sengun's not going to have to adjust to being a number one option. Udoka's not going to have to adjust to teaching a new group of guys. The Rockets hopefully will have a little bit, some more wrinkles in their offensive repertoire to where we don't just see four guys standing around while Alpi has the ball in the post and a double or a triple team that starts, running at his face. All these little things that are full-blown expectations for this next season. And if we don't see the Rockets take those steps forward offensively, then this team is absolutely going to struggle again as far as their offensive efficiency is concerned, because it just felt like they left a lot on the table as far as offense last year, where they very intentionally dumbed it down. They wanted to minimize turnovers. They wanted to minimize mistakes. And because of that, they kind of capped their offensive ceiling last season, but I think it worked because it allowed them to really lean into and focus on the defensive identity of the team, and it allowed the young guys to just kind of take some time to grow up. And now we're going to see the fruits of that labor that's installing that kind of ground floor of the offense and everything. Although I will say I'm traumatized by the Stephen Silas era, because Silas said the same thing. He was like, I kept it pretty vanilla this season, and then it stayed pretty vanilla all 3 years. So that was kind of concerning. But I digress. We're not going to revisit the Stephen Silas trauma here on the podcast. Coming up, we want to get into what is it going to take for Alperen Sengun to become an all-star in the Western Conference. Who are his biggest competitors to make the all-star team this season? We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. We've been talking a lot of Alperen Sengun on this episode, focusing in on his offensive efficiency, focusing in on his playmaking. We've kind of established here a little bit that, Alpi is who he is as a defender. He was able to be the man in the middle for a top 10 defense. That defense is potentially only going to get better with the additions of Amin Thompson having a bigger role this upcoming season, getting Tari Eason back and healthy. So at the same time, I think he does what he's supposed to do defensively. Looking at kind of what we've discussed so far on this episode, and you even go back and you can look at his numbers from this past season, right? So this past season, Alperen Sengun averaged 21 a game to go with 9 boards, and I'm averaging here 9 boards, 5 assists, 21, 9, and 5. Like, that's a pretty strong stat line. I would argue that is already an all-star caliber stat line. And we saw Alpi racking up some all-star votes, ultimately didn't make the team. I do wonder, though, what is it going to take, maybe stat-wise, for Alperen Sengun to make the all-star team this season in the Western Conference? You look at last year and the bigs selected ahead of him in the Western Conference, and it comes down to it's Nikola Jokic, Anthony Davis, and Karl Anthony Towns. What would Sengun, and it's not only those guys that he's up against as well, but it's also Victor Wembanyama is going to be very much in the mix this season as an all-star. I struggle. I don't know what he would need to do to be able to just be a de facto, okay, he has to be selected to the all-star team. What do you think? Just from a sheer numbers perspective, Mitty, what would Alpi have to average? What would be like the bare minimum for him to be at least in the running to make the all-star team?
So that's a great question. So like, just to caveat that, one of the things, even before I talk numbers, one of the things he has to do is just increase his efficiency, true shooting and effective field goal percentage, especially in the low post. And he needs to be able to hit some sort of, three-point shot, which I think he can do, and I can go over that. But for him to actually, make the All-Star game, I think we're looking around, 24 points, approximately about 10 rebounds, because he's close to what he averaged. There's going to be a lot of rebounders on our team, so I don't think it's going to explode. But one of the things that has to increase by a lot is his assist, which I think can get up to about 7.5. Those are optimistic numbers. Not everybody agrees with that, but just from the trajectory he's been having since his freshman rookie year, I think he can achieve that. And people say, "Oh, that's just Sabonis," that's what Sabonis does, but that's not what Sabonis does, because Alpi is one of the best low post players in the game, and he can self-create. A lot of the things that Sabonis gets is a lot of gimmies, and that's including assists and rebounds and points. I'm not discounting Sabonis, but what Alpi has done is objectively a little bit harder and a little bit harder to achieve.
But using Sabonis as an analog here for Sengun, I do think it makes a lot of sense, because the other element, it's not only just going to be about the counting stats for Alperen Sengun. It's going to be about the team success. I think is going to be the biggest barrier to entry for him. You look at the 3 names that made it last season in Jokic, AD, and Cat. All 3 of those teams had the team success behind them. Now, AD, Lakers were kind of, milling about throughout the year. But it's Los Angeles. It's Anthony Davis. Like, he's been a multi-time All-Star already. It's kind of hard not to include him at that point. I think the Rockets are going to have to clearly be, so if we're looking at just Jokic, AD, Cat, and then we'll throw Wemby into the mix. I don't think there's another center that I'm missing in the West, at least, that I'm going completely off the top of my head here. I guess Sabonis is there too, but
and Rudy Gobert, but Rudy Gobert didn't make it, but he was very close, I think.
Okay. So Rudy Gobert and Sabonis is a couple. I'm making the analog to Sabonis, and I'm completely whiffed on his name. But I think that not only would Sengun have to at least have comparable stats to one or multiple of these guys, but it's going to take really ultimately the team success to where if the Rockets, if 3 of these guys are ahead of the Rockets in the standings by the time All-Star voting concludes, then I don't think there's a shot for Sengun to make it, right? Because if it's the Nuggets and the Lakers and the Wolves and they're all ahead of the Rockets by 2 or 3 different spots, unless Sengun's just blowing it out of the water with the counting stats, then I feel like he's going to lose out on a spot again. He's going to have to be, the team as a whole is going to have to be ahead of one of these other kind of incumbents for him to take an All-Star spot and really cement himself as a bona fide All-Star this upcoming season.
Absolutely. So the wins part that you mentioned is actually a double whammy, because by winning, it places what have you done on your team in a better standing among coaches and in the league and votes in general, because you're doing it on a winning team, so that means a lot more than doing it on a losing team. But not only that, if we're winning, that means other players are actually playing to their potential, which means they're making shots, which means that Alpi is actually able to get assists. So whether that's through cuts or wide open threes, or even just, pick and rolls with Alpi, and then people are doing cuts, he's going to get his numbers like either way with a win. So we have to win. That's the biggest thing. Like, anything else next season, like I think the biggest actually label for next season, the biggest, definition or whatever is just winning. You need to win on all counts, especially for the playoffs. And in this case for Alpi's all-star selection.
Yeah, for that candidacy to come to fruition, the Rockets are going to be it's going to be contingent on a lot of the internal growth and development, right? Can other guys kind of live up to their end of the bargain? Because we saw Alpi, he already played at an all-star level last season. There's still more that he can dig into, and he can get better in a variety of ways, as we've kind of illustrated throughout this episode. But a big part of it is just going to be, can his teammates step up and knock down those shots, right? Can they get a little bit more creative with what they do offensively? I think for me, like a realistic stat line for Alperen Sengun this upcoming season is something along the lines of like, I think 24, 10 and 7, right? Like right there seems like a really attainable stat line. But at the same time, I also wouldn't be shocked to see him actually breach like 25 points a game. That might be kind of crazy to some, because I mean, he's coming off a season where he averaged 21.1, jumping up almost 4 whole points per game to 25 or 25 plus seems like a pretty substantial leap. But keep in mind, the Rockets were basically playing like, a slowed down version of their game last season for about 2/3 of the season. It wasn't until post All-Star break that Ime really like let the young kids run loose and do whatever they wanted, and he upped the tempo. They started playing with more pace, and I do think that Sengun is capable of playing with more pace, even though he likes to play in the half court, likes to get to his spots, likes to post up, all that stuff. He absolutely can be a guy that can play a faster brand of basketball, and if the Rockets collectively as a team are playing faster, then I fully expect him to have more opportunities. There'll be more possessions, and I do think there's a world where he can get up to, like, again, that 24, 25 points per game. 10 rebounds. I'd like to see 10 rebounds again. He was flirting with it. He was at 9.3 this past season. Just lock in the double-double consistently. And then as long as his teammates hold up their end of the bargain, he should be that 7 to 8 assists per game kind of guy, just based off of what we saw last season. That doesn't even include the new offensive wrinkles and whatever Ime is going to roll out with the coaching staff this season to make opportunities not only easier for Alpi, but easier opportunities for his teammates as well. That's what I'm predicting. That's what I hope we get this upcoming season. Mitty, I want to give you a chance to plug Center's Culture really quick before I get to. I've got one more thing for you before we wrap up the show, but go ahead and plug Center's Culture. All
right, guys. It's coming out. The V2 is already out, but V3 is coming out. You're going to be able to compare players. There's a stat head, the stat head comparison or whatever. You compare 2 players. This one's better. This one has scoring and efficiency, 3-point shooting, 2-point scoring, clutch play, self-creation, playmaking, rebounding, defense, and hustle. Not only that, but you can go into game analysis and analyze every game, game by game, see catch and shoot shots, see pull-up 3-point shots, and much, much more. It's going to be centersculture.com. I will post the launch date on my Twitter sometime soon, but as of right now, it is in hiding, almost about to come out.
All right. Coming soon. We're just going to slap a big coming soon label on it.
Coming soon.
All right. I'm going to include a link in the episode description as well, so be sure to go check that out. You guys give Mitty all the support in the world. This man is incredible. Last thing I've got for you, Mitty, and this will be a fun one. What is the best Alperen Sengun quote?
Oh, man. Damn, I thought you were going to hit me with some stat stuff.
No. I said it was going to be a fun one. And look, this could be personal preference. You don't have to try to appease the masses. What's your personal favorite Alperen Sengun, his best quote?
Okay. There's a sentimental one, but then there's also the classic, I'm so happy. It's just,
hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You can put on a shirt, you can just say it to anybody and they understand what it means. There's one, I don't even want to go into it, but I saw him one of these times, and he wrote me an autograph. But he on that autograph, he said, if you want it, you can get it. Basically in Turkish, "İstersen yaparsın." On a jersey that I had, a Turkish jersey that I had, and he signed it. So that's another quote.
Wow, I love it. We'll learn something new. That's cool. He went outside the box with his quote. He said, I have a VIP personal quote that I'm going to bring up to ruin your fun little segment to end the show. No, that was awesome. Again, he's such a cool, warm, happy guy, and he's genuinely like one of the best guys that I've had the chance to like interact with at the NBA level. But Mitty, that's going to do it for our show. Let everybody know where they can track you down at, man.
Yeah, man, I'm at Mitty Data on Twitter or X. And then if you want to go to my website, it's centersculture.com. Appreciate it, Jackson. Thank you so much.
But that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.